And 2 days after they bought it, somebody drove through their
Two members.
Well, these people had to eat it too. Hey, you take the puppies. You hadn't even given me the policy.
I can't do that anymore.
I would not bother playing with us.
Yeah, you put your name, your company, and your name,
just like Colorado. Half of the insurance
No, you're not.
All right. How's everyone doing tonight? A little feedback here. We're going to go ahead and get this thing started. I'm Bud Scott, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Cannabis Industry Association and General Troublemaker. See if we've got some feedback issues. Everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me okay in the back? All right, thank you guys for coming out. This is our monthly installment of our Oklahoma City Policy and Pints. Sorry guys. There we go. Gotta go back to my rock star days, working with mics like this. So thank you guys for coming out. We have these every Thursday of the month, 6 p.m. flat here at the 51st Street Speakeasy. Then on the fourth Thursday of the month, we actually have our Tulsa Policy and Pints. This month will be the first one we've had since the COVID issue. Hey, Mike. Thank you. Sorry, hold on a second. Okay, we have feedback issues now? All right. We should have done our mic checks earlier. There we go. There we go. All right, thank you, Kaylin. Kaylin Belmar, ladies and gentlemen. So you guys probably interact with Kaylin quite a bit. He's our membership manager, helped basically run our ship next door to our headquarters. A little announcement there for those of you who don't know. We had an electrical fire at our building next door 2 weeks ago, and it's been quite a harrowing process. Fortunately, nobody was harmed, and no irreplaceable stuff was lost, but it's really been quite a pain. So we've been moving for the last few weeks. And so anyone looking for us, we will no longer be next door. We had conference rooms, meeting spaces available that many of our members took advantage of. Several of our members also officed with us next door, including Green Grove CPAs and Joanna Hammer with the Urban Canopy and a few other graphic designers. So unfortunately, we're going to be looking for a new home. If anyone has a sweet setup that they want to offer for a very friendly nonprofit rate, we would not turn it down. So here for the next probably 6 months, we'll be hunting for another office space. Keep your eyes peeled. If you have anything, please let us know. Just know it's been fairly hectic, and if anyone's had trouble getting a hold of us, that's probably why. Because we're packing up and moving a bunch of stuff into storage. So thanks, fires. We're really actually fortunate. These two buildings are old as dirt and basically a box of tinder. So we're lucky the whole thing didn't go up. And I'm bringing an entire, basically slaughtered cow that we've had processed to the Oklahoma City Police Department or Fire Department, because I will tell you, those guys were consummate professionals. They came into my office space and took my diplomas off the wall, took family photos, and covered everything up with a tarp before they even sprayed anything in there. The guys are just absolute pros, so we're very fortunate to have them. So it's been quite a bit, but if anyone has any leads on that, please let us know. So again, tonight, it's our monthly installment. We are very fortunate to have the newest director of the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Agency, Dr. Kelly Williams, to join us. She come on up. So she's going to be our guest tonight. We got water as well. So we've got a couple of housekeeping things to announce too. We've been having committee meetings up here on the first Mondays every month. Our growers committee has been meeting to discuss all things cultivation, as well as some policy priorities and then some presenter options. We have some folks, Cartel, I think, is chairing our processing committee, and that's getting kicked off as well. Dispensary committee really needs to kind of get going as well. And then our laboratory committees have been meeting off-site, so there's obviously fewer of them. But if anyone wants to get engaged, please email Kaylin and Kaylin@newhealthok.com. We'll get you hooked up with our committee chairs and get that rolling. But that's the first Monday, or excuse me, the first Thursday of every month. So please join up with that. Kaylin, you had another announcement for him.
Well, next week in Tulsa, did you go over that?
Yeah, we've got next week, Paul St. Pints in Tulsa for anyone who's to join us there at the Dead Armadillo Brewery. We'll be there. Hopefully it's not too cold because it's primarily an outdoor venue, but that's going to be a short-term deal. We lost our old venue primarily because they're still closed down for COVID. Anyone who's here as a guest tonight, encourage you to meet with Kaylin after the fact to secure your membership. We're a members-based organization with a small budget, so our membership dues really help fund everything and keep this organization rolling. So tonight, basically, let's get kicked off here. One of the things I want to do, because Director Williams is fairly new in this industry, and definitely with the OMA, is get kind of an overview of what the Oklahoma Cannabis Industry Association is and what we've done here. We have the pleasure of serving as kind of the founding body for the actual 788 campaign. We built upon all the efforts that tons of volunteers and grassroots folks have put together for several years in getting the 788 ballot on, or 788 petition on the ballot. And then our organization put together through our members, probably 99% of the funding for the campaign, as well as all the materials. So if you had a yard sign, if you had a hat, if you had a shirt, if you had one of our snazzy tank tops, which I still have several, you do not want to picture that, by the way. But we have all those. So those were done by our members and really funded the campaign effort. So we've been there since day one, getting this thing rolling. Then I've had the pleasure of working with our elected officials in the legislature for the last 3 years on developing appropriate public policy that is welcoming and conducive for the fastest growing industry in Oklahoma. We recognize that there was a tremendous opportunity coming here, and all of you have taken advantage of that. So we've really had the opportunity to get out there, work with our legislators, work with our administrative agencies, and trying to educate them on the perspective as it comes from the industry, working with city council members, with inspectors, code enforcers. That's what we do full time. So we've done this now since 2017, well before the election, and for the last few years have been the largest lobby presence at the Capitol. I've had the pleasure of sitting on the Food Safety Standards Board / Medical Marijuana Advisory Board since 2018 as an appointee from former Commissioner Tom Bates. And then one of our former board members, Becky Johnson, also sits on that body. We work with about 10 other regulatory agencies on that advisory board to help provide input to the OMA as they develop the rules that regulate our industry. It's been a very positive body. It allows us to communicate with the folks that regulate us, that impact our business every day, and educate them on what is functional, what's not, and really how we can best protect our consumers, how we can protect our businesses as well. So that's really a lot of what our organization has done here. I used to always give this speech. We're like a three-legged stool. And that first leg of that stool is advocacy, working as a lobbying front at the Capitol, working with the cities. The second leg of that stool is education. And that's both education of our members, the folks that are in our industry, as well as educating people outside of our industry. So we've had the opportunity to present to other chambers of commerces. We've sponsored the Fire Marshals Conference last year, had speakers there trying to educate fire marshals on how extraction equipment works, how regulation should work as far as it pertains to that equipment. So it's both an education front. And then the third leg of that stool is community. And events like this are both our advocacy portion, but it's also building community, allowing folks to network together. And I think I can safely say that the vast majority of our members do business together. And during the first few months of our efforts, I'd stand up at our meetings and hold my arms out like this and always say, we're like a family here. And it's up to us to help build one another and build a program that is the most successful in the country and provides more opportunities than we've seen anywhere else. So that's basically the Oklahoma Cannabis Industry Association. So So without further ado, I want to introduce Director Kelly Williams. I'm going to have her give a little background on how she got into this position and a little bit how you've enjoyed it since, or maybe not enjoyed it. She's the third director that we have dealt with since the election in June of 2018. I really applaud the OMMA staff, leadership team, because they have not been provided a ton of stability, first of all. The OMMA is within the health department. We've had multiple directors of the health department, both before the election and since the election. And then the Secretary of Health and Human Services that oversees the health department has turned over, I think, 4 times. So it's really challenging to provide a consistent source of education and inform our policymakers when there's very little stability. We get done with educating someone and then they're out and someone new's in. So, but fortunately, we've had some really good folks in those positions, and very happy to have you. So, Director Williams, without further ado, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for welcoming here. You all already seem like a great crowd, and I appreciate the invitation. I'm Dr. Kelly Williams, and as Bud said, I'm the interim director here at the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority. I've been in that position, it's kind of blurry, since June or July. Things move really quickly there. The previous director, Travis Kirkpatrick, I knew him a little bit before, and when he became the director, he sought me out for the deputy director position because of my background, my skill set. It's definitely a new content area for me, but I'm one of those people that just really loves to learn and is really excited to just get in deep with something and learn everything I can about it. So a little bit about the background that brought me to being the deputy director, and then when Travis Kirkpatrick got promoted, moved me up into the interim director role. So I have a PhD in quantitative psychology, which is, I like to say, how to science. It's research methods and statistics, and I took that to Oklahoma City University, where I was their institutional research director for a little over 7 years. And that had everything to do from federal reporting, accreditation, data management. The bulk of my job was helping with data-informed decision-making, so really making sure that we had the information we needed as an entity to make good decisions for our stakeholders, for the public, and help outreach and help people understand why we were doing all the things we were doing. Even if it's not decisions that everybody really loves, sometimes you've got to make them, and helping use information and valid data to communicate those points is really helpful. So that's the skill set that I bring with me to the OMMA. I think Travis did a wonderful job really helping to set the agency in the right direction. So I'm really glad for the groundwork that he laid before me to make sure that everything was going the way that it needed to for the agency, and helping to develop better relationships with the industry and making sure that those lines of communication were really open the way that they needed to. So I really look forward to continuing that legacy, and I'm really excited about some of the goals that we have moving forward. Because at the end of the day, I'm probably going to say this about 1,000 times tonight. At the end of the day, the whole reason that my agency exists is to ensure patient safety. So at the end of the day, no matter what we're doing, no matter what policies we're enacting, that's got to be the bottom line. So making sure that our businesses know what they need to do to be in compliance with our rules and regulations, making sure that those laws and statutes are there in a manner that support patient safety. That's really what my focus is. We're trying to get out there and inspect businesses, make sure that, the industry is aware that, we have resources available. We're publishing guides on our website to help bridge information gaps for our licensees. We just published a new lab testing guide. It just went on our website this week. We had some new rules that went into effect recently. So we've updated those guides to make sure that everyone knows exactly what needs to be tested for what, when it needs to be tested, and we list our licensed businesses and labs online. We try to put a lot of information out there to make sure everyone has what they need to make sure that the product that's out there is safe for our patients. So that's really a little bit about why I'm here and what I'm about, and I'll hand this back to you.
Thank you. So I'd be remiss if I didn't actually introduce a number of our board members that are in attendance. Mr. Mike Irvin with Oklahoma Producers, also Oklahoma Pures, their product line, out of Shawnee is here with us. Ronnie Jaoud out of Tulsa with Astoria Growers. Cambry White, who's an attorney with Overman Legal Group and Climb Collective as well. All right, let me get back in my good spot. Lawrence Cadgigal, who's with Green Grove CPAs, who was one of our office mates over here. We're going to move together somewhere. And then Joe Lance with Genesis Testing. And then Joanna Hamrick with the Urban Canopy out of Tecumseh is back here as well. She does seed production. So we have a nice, well-rounded group. Not with us tonight, James Vandersee with Cannabis Labs here in Oklahoma City. Let's see, Joey Mybergen with Primal Cannabis out of Enid. Taras Kolenko with F5 and seed dispensaries out of Tulsa. Who am I forgetting here? Julie Giraco. Yeah, thank you. Julie Giraco with Three Leaf Labs out of, well, South Logan County, technically North Edmond. They've also got an outdoor grow out in Poto. So, and Blake Cantrell is our board president with the Peak dispensaries here, largely in the Oklahoma City metro area. So it's a nice diverse group. We've got growers, processors, dispensaries, and laboratories represented, as well as private sector legal. So I want to give you guys a hand. Thank you for being here. And let you guys know they're all over here. If you have any questions about getting engaged and how you can get more involved with the organization, please talk with them. So I want to jump on here. Some of the things we've been developing over the last 8 months, effectively, we had the new permanent rules that just went into effect about a month ago, and that covered a wide range of issues. And just so everyone understands, this is a rulemaking that had been in the works for well over a year. A lot of it really focused on testing standards, but it also started to address remediation and decontamination, which is something that we really needed as an industry. According to statute, we're really prevented from actually selling any product that fails testing. So the OMMA was willing to work with industry and develop some guidelines that allowed us, as much as we could with the current statutory restrictions, start to engage in the process of remediation and decontamination so you can sell your biomass to a processor and actually not have to trash all your product with failed testing for, say, yeast. There's a lot of good stuff in this round of permanent rules. Well, there's also a new round of emergency rules. Those have been signed by the governor, correct? Today they were signed by the governor. So we have another round of emergency rules. We've discussed all of these at our last several policy of pints in depth. So everyone should be somewhat familiar. We've sent those out to everybody. We'll send them out again. But now they're also on the OMMA's website under their regulations page. Then we've also got, oh wait, there's more. There's another proposed permanent rulemaking that I'd like Director Williams to address here in a minute, that will address another range of issues. And this is something that, unlike the emergency rules, and just to explain to everybody how that works, emergency rules are typically done when there's a threat to health, safety, or public welfare that needs an immediate response. And it basically circumvents what's required by the Oklahoma Administrative Procedures Act, where you have a public comment period, and there's a whole period of input, and then the agency actually adopts the rules. That's the emergency side of it. It's been done primarily because the agency hadn't had an opportunity to go through the rulemakings, and this industry is moving so fast that we needed to do this in some ways. But now we have the permanent rulemaking, which is in compliance with the APA. And again, it requires at least a 30-day public comment period where all of you can submit your input, and we highly encourage it on these proposed rules. And so that's one of the things I'd like to address here. So first, Director Williams, I'd like you to say what you feel like are some of the biggest gains and some of the most important points of these new rules.
Right. Yeah, this is a really important point to talk about, and Bud covered a lot of it. So the emergency rules that were just signed today by the governor and are going into effect, as he said, it covers decontamination and remediation. The previous rules technically allowed for remediation, but only for microbial failures, but did not technically allow growers who had product with a microbial failure to legally send it to a processor, because you can't transfer anything that's failed. So while it's technically allowed, you couldn't legally move the product. So unless you were a vertical, like, you couldn't do anything with that product legally. So we addressed that with the emergency rules, and then added decontamination for things like water content, for excess solvents past the allowable thresholds, allowing for those things to be taken care of through decontamination. So there's a slight difference in wording, but the end result is that you have a process that makes that product safe. We also clarified the testing process that goes along with that. So once you have that failure and you've remediated it, what you have to do for it to pass that testing so that you can then sell or transfer that product downstream to the next licensee. So that, I think, is probably the biggest win that we take out of our emergency rules. I'm trying to remember what all else was in there, because we really did have 3 sets of rules kind of swirling over our head at the agency at the same time. The permanent rules went into effect September 11th. The emergency rules we filed the following week, I believe, and then we also had to file the next round of permanent rules a few days after that. So it's hard to keep track of which things are in which bucket, but decontamination was certainly the biggest thing on that list. I believe we also added some things. Our laboratories now have to be accredited, but it is possible for a laboratory to be accredited in some things, but not others. So one of the things that we clarified is that if you are not, for instance, accredited to do pesticide testing, you would have to outsource that one test and clarify who did that testing. Another big win on that one, actually, certificates of analysis. I say COAs a lot, but I'm assuming this group probably knows exactly what I'm talking about when I use the acronym. So there were some issues with small font not being really readable, and people misunderstanding what their results were because of the way the font was. It seems silly, but there's a story or a reason behind every single ask we make, every single thing we put in the rule, there's a reason behind it. So really clarifying, minimum type sizes, making sure that it's very clear on the COA if something failed. So a lot of those things were really important. One of the biggest things on the next permanent rules that, as Bud said, are the public comment period just opened. So you can go on the Oklahoma State Department of Health website, and if you just search for rule and public comment, you'll find the new OMA proposed permanent rules. And there's also a link that tells you all the different ways you can provide public comments. So there's actually a survey, there's a link on that website, along with a draft and a summary of those rules so that you can read them. But there's a survey that you can submit comments through, there's a way you can mail them in, a way you can email them, and then there is our public comment hearing, which, forgive me if I'm wrong on the date, is November 17th of this year. So that information is all on that website, so you can look at all those different changes. The next round of permanent rules that you can do those comments on, one of the things that I think will make it a lot easier for our licensees is that we're actually just putting really clearly a fee schedule at the end of it. So if you do have any violations, instead of trying to search through the complex rules, and if you're not a lawyer, it's kind of a task to do that. So instead of having to search through those rules, you can look at the end and see, this is what I could be fined for these kinds of violations. Am I just holding this wrong? I just have a lot of feedback. Just hear this. But making it easier for our licensees to know, if I refuse entry to OMMA, like, that's a really big fine. If I falsify lab tests, that's a really big fine. If I fail to register my trade name, that's also a fine, but not as big a one. So my compliance manager wanted me to make sure everyone in this room knows that if you have a trade name that is different from the legal name of your company, you must put that in COMPLIT. You must put that in our website. It causes a lot of confusion. I've literally gotten calls from legislators like, hey, there's this business on the corner of this and this in this city. Like, is it legal? Because we list all of our licensed businesses online and they can't find it. The police chiefs can't find it. The legislators can't find it. So then they have to call us, and it's because somebody has a different name on the sign on their door than they do in our system. Okay, so just come on, log in and update it. It's not hard. It can save you a lot of hardship, and you don't want us to come and, give you a fine when really all you had to do was log in and fix it. Yes, sir. You can laugh at me, that's fine. But I also encourage you to go and look at our proposed rule changes and give us those comments, because while I promise you that there's nothing that we are asking for that we don't feel like we have a really good reason for, there are some things that we may not understand. There are unintended implications, and you all are the ones that help us understand that. You know, Bud's on our FSSB board, and he is not afraid to tell me when I am not achieving what I want to achieve, or if I am accidentally doing something that I don't want to. So he's not afraid to speak up and tell me when we're not doing things quite right, and we've made changes based on that fact. So it is really important that you all participate in that process. It affects you very deeply, so we really welcome that public comment. Like I said, that is now open. I think it opened like today, or maybe this week, but go ahead and take a look at the rules. The long list is there, and then the summary of what the actual changes are. It's much easier to read. If you have not signed up on our website for our emails, I highly encourage you to do so. Those new permanent rules that went into effect about a month ago, we made sure to email everyone on our sign-up list a list of that summary of changes and a list of the current rules, so that it's not a surprise to you that the rules have changed, because if you're not paying attention to that rulemaking process, it's really easy to miss that things have changed. So we are more than happy to send out some emails to let people know when those occur, so that way you know what you need to do to be compliant. Like I said, there's always a reason for what we ask for, so those things are important. We're asking you those things for a reason. So, you know, my communications manager is right back there. We've got some time on the calendar tomorrow to put out some communication to everyone who signed up for our emails about the new emergency rules that just went into effect because the governor signed them today. And, you know, we'll continue to put those communications out there so that our licensees are aware of what's going on.
And just so everyone's aware, I mean, we've sent these out several times over the last several months. We'll send them out again, as well as providing a little guidance on kind of our points of interest on both the emergency rules and the new proposed rules. We'll also provide some language that you can have for submitting comments through the public comment process. So we will email you that. So check your email. If you're not getting our emails, please check your spam filter so you're getting this important critical information. These are all major program points that these have been worked on for literally like the last 2 years. Not all what makes every round. So it's very important. It's a pretty dynamic and changing landscape. So pay attention, because your business is very likely going to be pretty tremendously impacted. There's going to be a chance when we're done with the presentation to do a question and answer session. So I think we'll dive into some of the more specific rules issues at that point. But what I'd like to move to here, there's been a couple of major announcements that we've been waiting on for some time through the OMMA. One was the announcement of the award of the state testing laboratory. And it's kind of the air quotes state testing laboratory. It's basically the lab that will test the labs. And that was announced about a month and a half ago as being awarded to Demeter Laboratories here in Oklahoma City. And then the second large announcement is that the seed to sale contract, the inventory tracking system contract, was awarded several weeks ago to Metric, which wasn't a big surprise. They have the contract awarded in several states. But that's a pretty big change. So they have 6 months to implement their program per the contract with the state. So I think there's going to be a lot of updates here. I know that OMMA is working on trainings. They just had one this week or last week with Metric. Absolutely. And so what I'd like to do is maybe speak to first the Demeter contract and how you see that unrolling, what the impact and implications are, and then we'll move on to the CDC.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited about both of these things. You know, like I said, at the end of the day, our job is patient safety, and laboratory testing really is the cornerstone of that. So the QA quality assurance laboratory, they're the ones that are going to help us go around to the labs, help them problem solve any issues with their protocols. There have been a lot of complaints from the industry about variability in test results across different laboratories. And that's the purpose of the QA lab, is to help us tighten up those things and help make sure that all that testing is meeting all of the marks and is within an acceptable range of variability. So one of the things that's happening within the next couple of weeks are that all of the laboratories will receive certified, oh goodness, I can't think of the word now, but samples, certified, what?
Proficiency testing.
Yeah, it's for proficiency testing, but they'll receive certified samples that have a known amount of certain contaminants. And each lab will be responsible for testing it according to their normal protocols, and that will be tested against the known result. They'll be compared to the known result. And labs will have information about how well they stacked up to that known result, so that if there are any big deviations, the QA lab can actually help go in and tighten up their protocols, help identify the source of the variability, and clean up any issues there. That laboratory will also help us in the event of any necessary recalls. We can take samples to them. We can also do random spot checks for a product that's on the shelves. And we can also have them, they will be testing samples regularly from the laboratories. This is so much in my lab manager's bucket. I'm afraid I'm going to misspeak on some of this because he is very in the weeds on this, and he's a great clinical scientist, so he's got all of this just in his head. But so they're going to go and retest some of the samples at all of the different labs. We're still developing some of those protocols, and we'll make sure that we get as much information out there as we can as these things come up. But we only have, 20 some odd labs, so it's really easy to talk to them one-on-one, unlike literally any of our other licensing types. So Lee is really close with all of the labs, and he's working on those protocols with Demeter, and we'll be working on that communication plan with them, what that process is going to look like, not just in the beginning phases, but what that long-term plan will look like and what they can expect their interactions with Demeter to look like moving forward. But know that the purpose really is to tighten up that variability to ensure that those protocols really are meeting the marks with contaminant testing to make sure that those products on the shelf are safe.
First, a quick announcement. If you've ordered food, check your phone for text. There's a backlog of food. They'll let you know when it's ready. But on that point, this is something that we've been committed to since the beginning, is ensuring that we have really strong testing programs in place, both to protect the public, the consumers, as well as our companies. So we're a fan of this occurring. See if you could speak to one of the things we were hoping to prevent was kind of pay-to-play systems and laboratories really impacting the viability and consumer confidence in the product with the announcements and everything surrounding fast labs. And so if you could speak to me on that.
Yeah, so the QA lab will really help to make sure that what the testing that's going on there really is doing what it should do. The fast labs issue, I'm not really sure how deeply I can speak on any of that because there are a lot of pending matters, although they have surrendered their license. So, but doing those double checks on quality after those results have been put out by a lab, just taking some random samples and making sure, that's a good way to provide oversight to make sure that, nobody's consistently really far off, or really just to help check and catch those one-off issues. Sometimes there can be false positives or false negatives. And so doing these random spot checks can help prevent any of those things from getting to the market. It can help identify better protocols for the labs. So the seed to sale system, I am really excited about this. I'm sure a lot of you are already pretty familiar with what that is, but at the end of the day, the point is that every single medical marijuana plant and product in the state of Oklahoma that is legal is monitored in this system from the beginning of the growth cycle until the endpoint sale. I've given a lot of thought about why I'm really, really excited about this, because I know that this is a big ask for our licensees, right? It's a big change to how some of you do things, and it's a lot more oversight from the state. But at the core of it, some of the issues that we've run into, and I don't know, we've had another recall this week, but all of the commercial licensees that are in receipt of that product have already been contacted. So if you're not aware of it, it's not you. We sent the email because not all of the patients had been contacted yet, so we wanted to make sure that patients were aware if they had any of that product in their hand to not consume that product. So one of the issues there, there's been a lot of issues with forged COAs. Maybe a lot's not the right word, but there have been issues with forged COAs. So, when you have a product that you're trying to sell to a downstream commercial licensee, right? You've got your COA and it matches and it's all good. If you're a good player, right? If you're really trying to do it right, that thing matches up 1-to-1. You're doing your 10-pound batches. You're testing everything that needs to be tested, and that piece of paper matches with that product, and you send it over with the transport manifest and all the accompanying documentation. Okay, that's great when everyone does that the way that it should, but if you are receiving that product, it's really hard for you to know that there was no doctoring on that COA. What you could do is you could call the laboratory and say, did this licensee ask you to test this batch number on this date, and is this what the results really look like? Were there any fails? You can do that. You can genuinely do that. Every time you're about to make a purchase, you can protect your business by calling out loud. But the gap is, how do you know that that piece of paper matches up with that product and they didn't sell 10 other licensees, 10 products with that same COA? You really don't have a way currently to know. You rely a lot on trust, and in this situation, that trust was unfounded. Right? And now this commercial licensee has to recall a lot of products, and it puts their name on the line, and it's going to be a hardship for them. But with the seed to sale system, with those individual globally unique identifiers attached to each product, you can know that that COA matches to this physical product you're looking at. And what you can also do is, before that transaction even occurs, because in the system you actually have to say, Kelly's processing plant wants to, sell this lot to Bud's dispensary. Well, Bud can get in there, he can get in the system, and he can look and see, was it the correct strain that I ordered? Was it the correct quantity that I ordered? Is it the licensee I expect it to be from? But you can also look at the test results of a product before you purchase it. So you can know that it passed, and those lab results have to be entered directly by the laboratories. So it's not people telling you that something passed, it's the lab assuring you that it did, and then you have a way to look at that product and know that that product is what you intended to buy and really did pass all those tests. So that's the end goal of this system. It allows us to track and trace all the products. We had to send that email because even though you're supposed to keep all those records and be able to contact everyone who you sold product to, they haven't been able to do that in a timely fashion. That's the problem. If we have this system in place and fully up and running, I can get in there and in about 5 minutes, know every single shelf, every single location that affected product is sitting on. I can know how many were sold to patients, and I can know where that went so that we can contact them and let them know that that product may not be safe for consumption. So that's why I'm really excited about the seed to sale system. It will integrate with a lot of you already have point of sale systems or inventory management systems, and Metric can use the API to connect with a lot of them. So for a lot of you, you've got that system in place, but you still have to go and do your monthly reporting with us manually and type in, 100 different fields of data. That's kind of a pain, right? And there's a lot of room for human error, and it takes a lot of time. But if you already have one of those systems that integrates with Metric, your monthly reporting is taken care of just by utilizing your system properly. You still need to double check and make sure that it's getting uploaded correctly and that your system doesn't have any glitches and isn't misreporting anything anywhere. But that can save you a lot of time every single month. So there are benefits to the licensees, not just in the assurance that the products that they're purchasing and that they're sending on down the line are safe, but also there are some benefits to just your daily processes and to make sure that it's more accurate, expedite some of those requirements, and it helps us a lot just to know what should be where. If there's a problem, it can help us identify weird patterns. It can help us a lot as a regulatory body to make sure that everything is going the way that it should be going.
So a couple of things there. One, on the testing. I think anyone who's been coming to our events for the last 2 years understands that with the 10-pound test batch, whether it's harvest or production batch requirement, the OMAs largely have their hands tied on that issue because that's in statute. That's what's been done through the legislature. Now, it's been a priority of ours since that statute was passed to change that, because we are one of the only industries in the United States that has such an ambiguous requirement for testing. On our Food Safety Standards Board, we have representatives from the Department of Agriculture, we have pharmacists, we have a whole range of folks there that will all say, though they've said it publicly during these meetings, that no other product is required to be tested like this. Eggs aren't required to be tested like this. Meat, you usually do what's called process validation. And many folks have had glazed over eyes in these rooms as I've talked about process validation, because it's not exciting, it's not sexy. But what it does is it allows us to both verify our process and make sure that we are doing it safely and make sure that we're passing all of those tests while also not creating an incredibly complex. Is the largest kind of commoditization of cannabis that we've seen in the United States. Large outdoor grows, it's moving towards an agricultural style instead of craft indoor grows where, yeah, it's super easy to just have a 10-pound requirement and then RFID tags for your tracking. It's going to be a lot different when you're growing 300 acres of this product and much more burdensome. So just kind of wanted to touch on that. Also brought up the RFID tags. This was an issue that I spoke with her predecessors quite a bit about. And I'd like you to speak to this issue that, you know, the issue with RFID tags, those are radio frequency identification tags. It's been required by Metric, who is the vendor for the state seed-to-sale program, in multiple other states, 14 other states. They've been sued over this in several states as well. The RFID tags are very expensive. They can run upwards of 75 cents a piece, depending on what program they're utilizing. And that falls on you, the licensee, not on the state. It's my understanding that during the process for the contract, there's a requirement that two budgets were submitted, one with and one without RFID tags. I'm not sure if that's all the case or not, but it was definitely something we spent a lot of time discussing, because there's a lot of alternatives available here besides these radio frequency tags. You can do barcodes, you can do digital graphing, and just kind of want to see what, if you have anything to say about it. I know you didn't select the contract.
So before I forget, I want to back up to process validation. That was actually in the OMMA request bill last legislative session that passed, but unfortunately was vetoed. And that is on our list of legislative asks again this year, because we recognize that it's a good way to balance productivity for the industry, the costs, as well as the correct amount of oversight to ensure safety of the product. So that is on our list again this year. Hopefully we don't run into the same roadblocks this year. And I understand what you're saying about the RFID tags. There is a cost. With Metric for packages, it's 25 cents, and for plants, it's 45 cents. And I do understand that that can be burdensome for the larger growers or larger processors. What I'll say to that is, you know, there are some states that approach that cost very differently, but we have some of the lowest licensing costs in the state. The reason that this makes sense for us, in my opinion, is that, and I know that some of you may disagree with me, that's okay. You know, we could scale up those licensing costs and approach that model differently, that pricing model a little bit differently, but that would penalize the smaller businesses who don't have as many sales. You know, if we had to up that licensing cost to help cover some of those costs, you know, it wouldn't be scaled to the size of the business the way putting that tag cost on the business approaches things, if that makes sense. What I'm saying is that other states that include the tag costs, that provide the tags, to cover that, we would have to, right, yes, yeah. So, and I understand, you know, that, so to that point, I understand that this is probably going to be the least popular thing that I talk about today, and I get that. But the idea that globally unique identifier is really important, because if it were just barcodes, if it were something else, you know, it could be duplicated. It may not be globally unique. And that's really important, like I was talking about earlier, that you can lay eyes on a product and know that what you are looking at is in fact what was tested, was legal product, brought from this licensee, sent to this lab, passed these tests, had this potency. Without that globally unique identifier, it's really difficult to do that. And I can't think of any way to ensure that level of accountability without something like an RFID tag. And I know that like I said, this is going to be the least popular thing to talk about. Y'all probably going to be more mad about that at me than anything else that I do. But, as Bud was talking about, when we had those proposals, what each, the scoring rubric looked both at the cost to the state and to the licensees, and both of those were in the scoring rubric. And when we evaluated all of our applicants, it was metric that went out, including this budget, with both of those things being part of the evaluation process.
We'll do that in the Q&A here in a second. The only point that I'll make on it is, and maybe this is something that we work with at the legislature, is the cost of these tags. This is something that the tens of millions of dollars that our industry is generating in the state by virtue of our 7% tax, maybe that could go to cover these. Because we have quite a bit of money that's actually being generated. That the agency requested on like $14 million last year. Yeah. Exactly. So there's a surplus of funds that perhaps this is something we work with the legislature on, but it's definitely an issue that we're going to want to address here. Obviously we're going to have questions on this at the Q&A session, but real quick, wanted to touch on something. Maybe you could say what some of the legislative priorities are for the agency this year and what you're hoping to see and work with the legislature.
Process validation obviously is one of those legislative asks. I'm trying to think about what all else was on that list. Right now there's a lot of ways that we can get stuck when there's a recall. We don't have the ability to be as expedient as we would like to be. The seed-to-sale system will help with some of that on one end. However, when we are aware of bad product, what we have to do is request that our licensee initiates the recall. Now, there are consequences for failing to comply with that request, but we can't go in and embargo bad product that we know to be contaminated. If the licensee didn't want to cooperate with the recall, even if we have plenty of test results to indicate that that product is not safe, we can't just go in and say stop. What we'd have to do is we'd have to go to a judge. We'd have to have a hearing set for several days out. I think it's like 10 days out even, and go about it that way and have a court order them to stop. We don't have the ability to act nimbly in those situations, and I think that that's really important. I think of what all else was in our legislative asks, and it has been a minute since I looked at it. We are working on them already. We've had conversations with legislators. My general counsel is actually working on drafting those right now, so you think they would be at the top of my head between the rules and the recall and the metric kickoff. There's plenty of things swimming in there. My analogy, those people who keep 8 plates spinning on little sticks, that's my job, is to do all of the sticks and make sure that nothing falls over.
Just so everyone's aware that last year, and Director Williams referenced the House Bill 3228, that included many of the OMA requests from the year before, many of the priorities that our association had worked on and educated policymakers on too. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed by Governor Stitt, and we're very likely to see another version of that come through the legislature this year.
It's probably worth saying that 3228 is in fact our starting point for this year's legislative ask. So if there was anything else that you were really hoping would go through last year and it hasn't, that all is I think 99% of it's carrying over.
And that addressed issues like the 10-pound batch as well. So we're very likely to see these addressed at the legislature, but you never know what's going to happen over there on 23rd Street at the Capitol. Never have a clue if they're going to pass something or the governor is going to get a wild hair and veto it. So it's up to us to continue to try to educate them on this and work with our agency folks on this issue. So it's about 7:15 right now. I'd like to reserve the remainder of this time for Q&A session. I'm sure everyone has a lot of points they'd like to request. All I'm going to ask is that, first of all, we're ending this promptly by 8:30. And so we got a little over an hour for questions. What I would request is try not to ask questions that specifically apply to your business. That's something that should be done outside of this public forum. Keep it more generalized and keep it civil as always. We try to be a good crowd here. And we'll call on you to ask a question. When I call on you, you get to ask one question. We're going to go to several other people, then we can come back and have a second question. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up for questions. First hand up is back here. Yes, sir.
So there's a few labs out there that are starting to do a processing batch test, which would be, they're doing a 50-pound batch test, asking people to take the 10 pounds, pull 5 grams from each of the 10 pounds, and then turn in 5 samples of 5 grams. And then they're going to homogenize the test and give you one test so it can be processed. Is that legal?
Okay, so the question, we have this streaming online, so there's folks at home watching as well. So I have to repeat the questions. The question was about, is it legal for testing laboratories to homogenize multiple samples from different test batches to try to get it in under one production batch, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
No.
So High Grade Lab is offering that, and I talked to them on Tuesday, and High Grade is saying that they will do that too.
Well, yeah, let's not publicly shame anyone. So, okay, so we got a clear answer on that. Joanna?
Are the RFID tags active or inactive?
Question is, are the RFID tags under the metric contract active or inactive? And then do we have an idea of what the cost will be for the readers?
What do you mean by active?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, like electrified, like, no. So they're passive then. Sorry, I'm learning all of this technology. What? It's 45 cents for plant tags and 25 cents for package tags. So each plant has to have a tag and each package has to have a tag.
How do you read the tag?
So you can look at the tag and you can read the number off of it. You can optionally get readers. I do not know offhand how much those would cost our licensees, but that is not required to be compliant with the system. They are readers. You have a reader.
So every RFID once it gets into the metric system, so you'll get a whole batch of tags, so you know, flowering, whatever system you have. Once they put it in the metric, then it gets transferred to, once you harvest, then it gets a different batch number or tag number.
So what he's saying is you buy the tag up front. You buy a bunch of tags, you have to buy
And then they individually activate. No, you're good.
One at a time, please. Yep. So the question is there a real possibility, and if everyone keep kind of one at a time here so we can keep the murmur down a little bit, we appreciate it, but their question was, is there an opportunity to do indoor versus outdoor as far as how the tags are applied, and it should be, honestly.
So that's not currently how the system works, but I understand that you all are going to make asks for what you need at the legislative level, and I understand that, you know, we've got to move forward with the way the system is set up. Yeah, some of this is based on the way the metric system is designed to work. So we kind of have to utilize their protocols. There will be trainings for the industry, and they do have a lot of videos already online. They have a YouTube channel that explains how some of their processes work that are consistent across all the states. But they will offer training to all of our licensees. Before you get into the system, they make sure that you know how to use it. So when we have like a schedule for when those trainings occur, we will put that information out. We are still working on that. We just had our kickoff like literally last week, so I'm still learning a lot about the way their system works. They have 6 months to get their system ready. We're going to get a timeline for what you have to do when, but the contract gives them 6 months to prepare their system to work based on our rules and regs and to get everything ready. After that is ready, after that system is up and running, then there will be, the time window for when our licensees have to do this and that and the other. We don't have that yet because we just got this started. So I don't have answers on what those time windows are and what that looks like for the licensees just yet, but we are working on that. And as soon as I have that, we will make that available to our licensees.
Thank you. And you're obviously hearing some of the concerns that are going to be pretty prevalent on this issue, especially because Oklahoma is very different than every other state that issues commercial cannabis licenses. You have small-time operators here that can't afford 4 people to do data entry and tagging and just regulatory compliance, as opposed to folks working out in the field doing sales, all that. This is the first market where we've really seen, I think, such opportunity for small businesses. Ronnie? So the comment for those listening at home is about the transportation license that is automatically issued and guaranteed as part of statute in State Question 788. When you have a commercial business license, with the new transportation agent requirements, that's basically worth the parts of the comments about the rules mandating that you can only have people with transportation agent licenses for that licensee in the vehicle when you do transport. And the comment was really about, hey, sometimes you got to drive 5 hours, sometimes you have to have security in the vehicle. And this means now you'd have to either hire out third-party transport or get transportation agent licenses for every person that would be riding the vehicle. Absolutely.
So you all might be very, but there was a story behind it, and there was a reason why we asked, not that you be alone, but that everyone in the vehicle had a transportation agent license. Created a problem. So that's why we approached it that way, and I believe that the commissioner took that out, but we'll have our emergency rule communication going out pretty soon. So you get your grower's license, and then you have your transportation business license. That is what permits your grower operation to transport. Not all licensing types actually come with that. Right now, labs don't, even though we're going to try to address that. Basically, that is what enables you, right? Right, and so unless I'm mistaken, that is not going to be the case, that's not being put into place, okay? So the transportation agent license is what tells us that that person you have transporting the medical marijuana has your permission to transport your medical marijuana. So what is the license fee? It's $100. I believe that there is an ask on the table to reduce that price to make it less burdensome on the licensees. But again, you've got your grower's license that allows you to grow. You need that transportation license to allow you to transport. But the individual people transporting have to have that agent license so that we know that they have your permission to transport your medical marijuana or medical marijuana products. So I know it's a pain, but that's part of what we need to make sure that the right people are doing the right things and that we have oversight over the people doing that. Because if they're not our licensee, it's difficult for us to ensure that they're being compliant because we don't have oversight authority if we don't have a license on that.
And real quick, that was one of the things at our last advisory board meeting that I brought up specifically is about your grant of the transportation license. There should be a conduit when you're applying for your commercial license that at least the owners of that business, or maybe one or two, automatically receive a transportation agent license, because otherwise it's just a piece of paper that doesn't really do anything for you. And the term transportation agent literally means acting on behalf of someone else. So if you're the owner, you should be able to transport it. So I think maybe that's something we can try to request of the legislature to clarify, because in statute, it requires the transportation agent license to move anything. So just.
I don't have to software, I use a spreadsheet, and I continue to use spreadsheets.
The question is, as a licensee, she uses an Excel spreadsheet to track all of her data. With this metric program, will she still be able to utilize that?
Yes, so they do have a CSV upload option. You can also direct enter into their website if you're not even utilizing a spreadsheet, if you want to just do it manually. So there's 3 ways to connect. There's the website, the CSV uploads, or through a third-party system if you're already using one of those at your point of sale or your inventory management. So there's a few different options.
Do the same thing. It'd be the same thing. If you have your own software, if you're using Excel, so long as it uploads and provides all of the same data points to the system, then it should work.
Yeah, so Metric has to verify the API connection. So if you, depending on what your software looks like, they may be able to verify that. Do what? Okay, so maybe you can pull out a spreadsheet and then upload it that way. You know, I can't speak to the specifics of your business.
Okay, we got a question. Kaylin, I think we got one from online.
We've got 3 from online.
Let's do the first one first.
First one, for clarification on the monthly OMMA report, when asked to enter entity name, are we entering our legal corporation name or the trade name in which we are doing business as?
Okay, so the question is about, is when you're submitting your monthly report through to the OMMA and it asks for the entity name, is it going to be the corporate name or the doing business as or trade name? You're going to enter the corporate name first because that's what's on your license, but then there should be a trade name category that allows you to enter that as well.
I'm not sure if there's that box on, and if there's not, I can make that ask of my data manager to see if we can bridge that gap temporarily, but obviously the most important part is that you get your license number correct.
So business name first. Okay.
Second question, does Board of Health have to sign off on the rules? I'm assuming emergency rules and just any of the permanent rules.
Okay, so the question is, when you're going through both an emergency rulemaking process and a permanent rulemaking process, does the Board of Health have to approve of those before they're submitted?
So I think there might be some conflation of terms. So our Food Safety Standard Board, which we need to rename because that's not really what it is, the board that Bud talked about earlier, they give feedback on our rules that we then have to consider, but they don't actually have to necessarily approve the rules as they stand. However, the Commissioner of Health does have to sign off on the rules and can make some line edits if he does not think something is appropriate.
And to clarify there, the Board of Health is the regulatory body created by statutes, and I think it's in the Constitution actually, but the Board of Health oversees the entire health department. The advisory board, and the Board of Health has decision-making authority on a whole range of issues, but the advisory board is simply that, an advisory board. The OMA is not required to take any of our recommendations. Okay.
Last
But they often
question.
do.
So next question, does OMMA have a process improvement department, and how are they used if they do?
Question is, does OMA have a process improvement department? And if it does, how are they utilized?
So we have had some individuals in our agency who are tasked with quality assurance and those kinds of things, but we actually recently kind of shifted their roles. We now have a department that is dedicated to training and process improvement internally. So, you know, we have people who are doing QA, we're doing process improvement on the way that we go about things and looking for different ways that we can make things easier and better.
I'm gonna jump to, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Bud. Hey, on the remediation, when you have your product tested and you have more than 10 pounds and that fails, just like on the mold and the yeast, and then you go get that product remediated up to that 10-pound limit, you go back to the lab and have that approved and it's passed. I was told at that time, the lab that originally tested it that failed sent that in to OMMA, go do remediation, go get back tested, it passes, and nobody is notified at that point in time. So what are we supposed to do with our test that was solidified, that wasn't approved, that became approved? Who do we notify? Because the lab will not let you guys know that they retested and now it's been clear.
So the question is about testing and retesting on remediation or decontamination processes, and how do you notify the agency whenever you've had a test, you've remediated it, and then had your positive test afterwards?
So when we have seed to sale up and running, that's all going to be in the system, and we're just going to be able to look and make sure that it hasn't moved and that it's tested. We've recently started asking that laboratories notify us when there are testing failures so that we can follow up and make sure that that product is being treated appropriately. So right now, as it stands, what we're doing is we're calling licensees who have had a product that has failed and asking them for documentation, either that it has been disposed of properly or that it was remediated and has passed testing.
Thank you.
Now, just to dovetail on that, I know there have been several folks who have brought this up to me in the past several months about if you have a test and it fails for one contaminant and then you have it remediated and then it fails for something else on the second test, under the current rule or the new rules that actually X's out the product, you cannot then go back and remediate for that second failure because it's a full panel test. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Kaylin, again, real quick.
Okay, so another testing question. If you have one lab fail the test, they report it to you, a second lab passes them with the same things that they were tested for, how does that work moving forward?
Okay, question is about if you use one laboratory to handle your testing and you have a failed test, you use a second laboratory and they have a pass test, how is that handled?
So that's one of the things that we have clarified with the new, I believe that's in the emergency rules. What happens when you have disagreeing test results? And so we clarified that process. If you have a disagreement between those and you need to go get it tested again, and if you have two passing, then we're going to assume that fail was a false negative. If you have two failures, that product is done.
So essentially you just get two other tests other than the failing one, as long as the other two pass.
Right. If you have one failing test, we can't take one passing test to assume that it's good. We have to double check and make sure that pass is real.
I've got the exact same thing that just recently happened, and I asked for the third-party lab to be able to test it, and they said that they will not accept a request from a processor to have another test done by them. Who can ask for a test by the third-party lab?
The QA lab?
Yes.
So that is the OMMA state lab. So those requests come through us. They don't come from the industry.
How does that?
Okay, up front.
When you guys were talking about labs that are accredited, are there any specialized labs that you think?
No, I'm trying to answer that.
So the question is the requirement for accreditation of testing laboratories, and are there labs that specialize just in decontamination?
I thought you said that you have to be accredited.
Well, okay, so the question is about decontamination. So the laboratory doesn't do the decontamination, the processors do the decontamination. They handle it through either their extraction, et cetera. However, there are companies that specify or that specialize just in testing or in decontamination or remediation. And I know there's a little bit of kind of fogginess here as how they would be treated. They would be treated as a processor because they're not selling product. They'd be taking product from a licensee and then giving it back to them.
Right, and so we're trying to figure some of that out because, a grower can sell to a processor or to a dispensary, but it can't go upstream. A processor cannot sell back to a grower. So we're trying to figure out what those specialized companies, how they fall into this. Because in theory, if you're a grower, you want to send it to them, have them treat it, and then give it back. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. Maybe they have to pass it on to the next processor for you, but that's not usually the way you want to do business. So we're trying to figure out the best way to approach those, but there are specialized businesses out there that do that. Some of them will just come on site, so there's no transfer involved, depending on what it is you're needing done. But that makes it a little cleaner because you don't have to transfer it. It's still your product, but you can get it cleaned up.
So typically, if you were taking it, so I know we've got a few folks here that actually have these kind of businesses. Pureroads USA over here offers some of the decontamination processes. So talk with those cats, they know how to do this. But the issue is whenever you're going from a grower, commercial licensee, you use your transportation license, send it over to that company, which is likely going to have a processing license, because it's one of the only mechanisms right now that are available for them to lawfully possess this product. I think the bigger issue is how it's reported and how you handle that when it's going downstream. So probably something we're going to need to address. Ronnie, we'll go over here real quick.
So the lab shut down. What happens here? Are they still out?
Okay, so the question, and I think this is pretty timely, is if the lab has been shut down or lost their license to test under the OMA licensure, then what happens to the validity of those test results or COAs?
If they were licensed when they conducted the test, then that is a legal COA.
Okay, sir.
Yes. On 10 pounds of testing, if I buy 2 pounds of distillate that result in 40 pounds of end products, do I only need 1 test or do I need 4 tests?
Okay, so the question is about when you have distillates, so you have 2 pounds of distillate, but then it's going to result in 40 pounds of edibles. How do you handle the test on that? I'll say you're going to have to test both the distillate, and then you're going to have to test the gummies or whatever else you're making from it, the used product.
And that end production batch of those edibles will still have to be tested in those 10-pound batches, no matter how much concentrate went into it.
All right, Kaylin?
Okay, first of 3 questions. When will compliance checklists be posted?
Okay, question is, when will compliance checklists be posted?
As soon as they are processed and ready to be put up there. It's been one of those months where things don't stop, and my compliance manager has been working to make sure that that's ready for publication. Because what we want to do is we want to make sure not only is that a checklist that is easily readable for our licensees, but you can also refer back to the statute. Because some of the past checklists were in compliance, out of compliance, but it may not always be so obvious to our licensees whether the yes or the no was in compliance or out of compliance. So, while we've got those for our use, we need to get them ready for use by the more general public and not specialized inspectors. So we are working on that very diligently. I promise you that. We are trying to get them out just as soon as we can.
Thank you. Second question.
Second question, regarding OMMA inspections, are they scheduled in advance or is any notification given beforehand?
Okay, regarding OMMA inspections, are they announced in advance or are you contacted by the agency or is it a surprise inspection?
So our audit inspections do not require prior notice. They do often go ahead and give a heads up just so that, you can make sure that you've got, makes it go faster for us if you've got everything ready for us, even though you are required to have everything readily accessible on site for inspections. They do often do a courtesy call. Our compliance inspections by statute right now do require 24 hours notice, and so we do try to do that by email and by phone. The caveat to that is if we have reasonable expectation that there may be destruction of evidence in the event that we're aware of a problem, we do not require notice in those instances.
Okay, number 3 question, Caleb.
What is the game plan to conduct actual inspections by inspectors where they get out of their vehicles so we know if they're truly compliant, if we are truly compliant?
The question is about what is the game plan for I guess, actual inspection by inspectors. Maybe you could just discuss some of the inspection process and how that's working.
So we do have a team of compliance inspectors. Our compliance manager stopped by earlier but had to leave before this got started, but I'm sure she's going to be back another day to come and talk with you all. But we are getting those in place. We are conducting inspections, but we are going to get out there in greater numbers here in the coming months. We've contracted with the people who do food inspections across the state. If you're a processor or a dispenser, you may already be inspected by those individuals. And when they come, they will also end up doing OMA inspections. So we're leaning on them just because we have 9,000 licensees. That is a huge number. And, you know, I understand, you know, you all worked very hard on that state question, but 60 days was not enough time. So, you know, we really need just some extra hands to help with those inspections. So you may see a food inspector at your business to conduct an inspection. We have had a few people, some of that comment was including, you know, them not getting out of their cars. Sometimes we have reports of a business that may be operating when they shouldn't be. You know, if they don't have their OBN registration, or if they are reporting no activity on their monthly reports to us, we need to go and lay eyes on it to make sure that they're really not operational. So if that's what you're talking about, you might see someone in a state car just come and look and not get out of their car. That's just a status operational check. But yes, you will see my compliance staff out. You will see my audit staff out. They do come in to do inspections, but you will be seeing them a lot more because we are, you know, really trying to make sure that every single licensee gets inspected at least once in the next year. And I know that that's new for some of you. I know that you haven't seen us out in that capacity and at that level, but we are working to do that just to make sure that all the businesses are operating compliantly and they know what they need to do to get into compliance. And at the end of the day, again, that's to make sure that the product that's out there is safe for our patients.
Real quick, I'm going to ask a question myself. I know we discussed this in the past about the certificate of compliance process, and if this is something that the OMA is hoping to address with the legislature, that currently the CFC is required every year, which doesn't really make sense. When you do a certificate of compliance with a local jurisdiction, that's typically where you're getting your certificate of occupancy, saying you're allowed to open a business, you've completed all your build out, anything that that local government would require, that you're zoned appropriately, and none of that's going to change on an annual basis. That's typically something that, unless you've had a change of use of the business, or you've had over 50% modification to your actual facility, that would require a new building permit. So having that annual CFC is really kind of redundant, and we'll see if there's any thoughts of the agency about this.
It's hard for us to do much with that because there's no way for us to know whether there's been a 50% or greater change at a business location. If we don't have the city to go and do that, that's really kind of outside of our scope and the way the statutes are written. That just has to be part of the process at this time.
So something we're really working on with the legislature. Joe? Common question is about how OMA's internal team operates, especially when we see lack of communication or responsiveness. I will say it's gotten a lot better over the last year or so. It was pretty bad there for the first year, especially when the public phone line got shut down for like 9 months. So the question is really about maybe explain a little bit how that internal processes work.
Yeah, I understand about the transportation thing. The way the statutes are written, laboratories do not automatically get that transportation license. So then they have to apply for a separate license with a separate license fee. I'd like to see that changed. We are working on that because it doesn't make sense to me, especially when you're the labs and we really rely on you to go out and get those samples or to have those samples brought to you and conduct that part of this process. It's really important. As it stands in statute, we have up to 90 days to process a business license, but we typically get those done in 30 days or less. So I'm really sorry that you had so much trouble. And I'd like to understand that a little bit better. Maybe later we can talk about that, because if there is something that we need to address in the process, you know, I'd like to get on top of that. I don't know if there was a hang up in some of the application materials or if it literally just sat there and shouldn't have. But we are working on, you know, we talked a little bit about process improvement. We're working on developing some quality control procedures and protocols so that we're better monitoring that. So that is something that is important to me, and I want to make sure, usually if somebody waits more than 30 days, they know why, and sometimes they want us to wait more than 30 days because they're waiting on certificate of compliance. So, you know, we are working on that, and so let's catch up a little bit later because I'd like to understand what happened there so that we can make sure that that's not a typical situation.
And a follow-up on that, maybe a good just primer is, maybe you could say kind of how many employees you guys have and what the breakdown.
That was literally one of the next
That
questions.
was the next question.
I want to say altogether we have around 80 employees. I want to say it's around a dozen who do business applications. We have upped our staffing in patient application processing. I think we're at 26 right now, and that's in preparation for renewals. You know, they're going to hit us really hard in the coming months. I believe the first spring, there were 3 months in a row where we had over 20,000 applications every single month. So we are really enthusiastic about being staffed up there. I think our patient application processing, by law, we have up to 14 business days to turn those around, and we're working on day 4 right now. So we are really committed to making sure that that stays low. Our renewal turnaround time is even lower than that, so we're really trying to make sure that that is running smoothly. So we've really been evaluating the staffing levels. We're adding a few administrative assistants in compliance to help manage paperwork. We're adding a paralegal to help with that load because we've got a lot going on there, and they're going to help us, you know, communicate out statute, change requests, rule updates, all those kinds of things. One of the things that we're really working on, my communications team, we just hired a graphic designer. So if you've seen any shift in the way some of our output looks on social media, we've got someone new working over there, but what we want that paralegal and that graphic designer to work on is more of those guides for our licensees. We just put out that new testing guide, like I talked about, but we need to update our packaging and labeling guide. I'd like to see a guide out there for our businesses, like, all right, like here's our process, but also like don't forget OBN, don't forget tax, don't forget all these other things that you may not realize you need to do. I really believe very strongly in putting information in people's hands because that lets the good actors get their stuff together and be compliant, because then my compliance people, when they come out and do a check, they're in, they're out. We don't have to do fines or fees or notices of violation. You know, I'm really happy if the whole state were just really compliant and everybody was safe. It'd be really great, and then we could just come and like take a look at your stuff and talk about how great everything is. But you know, I know that's not where we're at yet, but what we can do to put that information out there, the better. And so that's some of the things that we've been working on in terms of staffing, is really identifying those things that can help us move a little bit better, help us communicate better with our licensees, and bridge some of those gaps. So long story short, I think about 80 employees right now, but that does not include the contract employees with the Department of Health who do the food inspections on our behalf. I think there's going to be about 60 different people who help with that, but that's part-time in addition to their other duties. So I'm not really sure what that would break down to in terms of FTEs. The call center, I want to say we have about 16, plus the manager and the lead, and then we are also adding a few other lead positions to make sure that they can help with those higher level questions that don't quite need to get to the manager, that the entry level staff really aren't prepared to help with. So we're trying to do things to expedite that and to make sure that our call center is responsive. I do believe that we still have a survey on our call center on our website. So if you do talk to our call center and you have any remarks, positive or negative, please feel free to share those with us because our QA team really does take a look at those. They also applications for accuracy, for timeliness on our behalf, those kinds of things to make sure that our staff are doing what they need to do, identify opportunities where retraining might be needed, if there are gaps in the way anybody's doing things. So, I take doing a good job very seriously, so we are working on a lot of those things.
And I want to repeat again that we've really been pretty fortunate. The agency is, especially over the last year or so, has just really improved, especially the communication. But the short amount of time that's allowed for this program to get into place, it's a miracle that it's been this smooth. Could have been a complete disaster. So we've been pretty fortunate. And typically, if you have issues, a lot of times we help each other as members. We reach out to the executive team over there, and a lot of times get stuff resolved. So just let us know. Lawrence, you had a question first.
My point for saying this is, with our context of the very Christian overlaying OBB, and as administrators, listen to the right. You're walking into a world, they've set you up for to do something that you did not select on these times. We have one volunteer, everyone in Colorado, Washington, California, it says the laws are you guys have listened to this. Here's the thing about it still. I'm not going to talk about the benefit system and the issue of the person who show where they're going to farm your street. We are afraid of just we're not all covered. I'm not worried about being unfair this long because the budget is a lot more than every other state. I'm putting it back on the line. It's not going to grow what we do. What is on that it's going they don't care about you, they want to do life. I told about our money tax. Activate people that don't say that there's something there. So I would be open to listening to our people that have come over from California, but don't want us to duplicate what they've done. But some people here, that way, maybe not the public forum. At some point, you guys can make it through that feedback, but people that you guys are going to that's more than easy by default. Just because it works in another state
Yeah, come on up here. Come up here. I want to make friends with you.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm from California, born and raised in Santa Barbara. I've worked with some of the largest cannabis companies I have my own logistics company right now. I provide security. I help people get licenses. I help farms in LA get their up and running guys that don't have quite as much experience. So why am I in Oklahoma? Good question. I have family here, and he's been trying to get me out here for years. And I was like, I love beach. I love my pina coladas. Don't really want to go. As you know, the current change, there's a lot of change in California. I'm not really happy about it at all, especially coming from the cannabis industry. And it's just, there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot more tax. They just jack the tax up again. And so we feed families. We hire people. People depend on us. They get paychecks every day. And I just want to be very frank and upfront with you. And I don't want to be the guy that kills the whole thing. But here's in effect. The last company that I worked with before I started working for myself, we spent $65,000 a year on metric. So that's just in tagging. We were $15,000 a month in testing, and it just kept getting higher. And as I'll use an old firm, the harder you squeeze your hand, the more that are going to slip through. And the reason I say that is because I think it opens doors for more traditional sales. That's what they call the old sales, traditional sales. And so what happens is a lot of these farms, especially friends of mine that are in Humboldt, some of these smaller guys that have been doing it a long time, but they want to do the right thing. They continue to keep working really hard to do that. But the tax, the metric tags, a lot of the stuff that is costing them, they thought, oh, well, that'll create more jobs because now you've got to set a whole firm of guys out into the field to tag all these things. So think about doing that with 85,000 plants. Even us indoor guys that have a lot of plants, that's a lot. So now I've got to hire 10 more guys to go do that. And what it does is operationally, it puts us way behind. So where we used to just have like an Excel spreadsheet and we would just go out there and we would get it tested and then we would go ahead and sell to market right before metric came on. They said 6 months, we're going to get everybody on. Didn't happen. 9 months, a year. Then it became a solid hand. You got to be on at this time. And so the guys that were on metric had to deal with guys that weren't on metric. You had to put it in the tags. If the tag screws up or something happens, we're in a bar, right? So I feel really overdressed. I should have brought a straight out Humboldt shirt or something. I feel really weird. But so you have to take that tag, and we would have to hold that tag for 6 months just in case we got audited. A lot of times when the auditors came, we unfortunately, it slowed even further down. So we went, I was just getting there. Thanks, Lawrence, for keeping me on track. So the issue was as soon as we started to have tag, we had to hire more staff, which then did go to hiring more staff. It ended up putting our workers a little bit deeper. But what ended up happening is we had a cutoff at like 10 o'clock. If you got an order, and it didn't matter if it was 1,000 pounds, I did it to you at 2 o'clock. I was in charge of logistics and warehousing and everything. So we just said, yeah, we can do that. As soon as metric came on, we couldn't fill orders in 48 hours. It really put us down. So I had the CEO just ramming down my neck. Why aren't we putting this out? And I said, I've got tags. Some of the products coming from another farm, they're not in metric. We're trying to get the tags. The tags wouldn't come out right. Then the machine would get stuck. And it just had like this snow effect. So I think what I'm trying to say is I'm moving my whole family here. I'm born and raised. I want to be here. I feel like these guys are brethren. We're all here to make this work. Oklahoma's an ag state. We're all in it together. Let's just do it better, because the backlash that's going to happen to a lot of the farmers is costing a lot of not only money but also people's jobs. So I just wanted to explain that. And have you gone to a lot? I had a big list, but I won't get into details.
Well, and thank you. I do appreciate that, and nothing if not receptive to your concerns. You're right though that I was kind of handed this, and the timing is what the timing is, and I'm here, and I have this system that's underpacked, and things are moving forward. And there's a lot that I'm learning about the system because, we had our kickoff like last week. So I'm still learning a lot of these things. And it is good for me to understand what your concerns are and the issues that you've been experiencing as we walk into this process so that we can better help now. So I appreciate that. I don't have a lot of answers for you right now in terms of what we can and can't do, because I'm still learning, what that baseline is for metric and what our abilities to do anything in terms of statutory requirements, rule requirements, and what makes sense for us for ensuring patient safety, because it does have to be a balance of those things, right? We've got to ensure patient safety, but we do also have to ensure that businesses are able to operate. So thank you. I hear you, and feel free to email me some bullet lists so that when we're having these conversations with Metric, with legislators, I'm armed with that knowledge of what your concerns are as well as what my concerns are. And sometimes we're going to be on different sides of an issue because we have different priorities, but as long as we can have these communication opportunities and be civil about it, and know that we're both fighting very hard for what we believe in and what we need, we're going to be in a lot better place than where things had been previously.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate what Lauren said, and then Jason as well, that this is Oklahoma. We have an opportunity to do something unique. And the programs of the past that we're kind of shackled to, they've been appropriate for that state and for their program, but this is a brand new program. There's been a lot of changes.
This industry, all this regulation, all you're doing, like I said, is traditional black market. People are going to get tired of the regulation. People are going to get tired of everything you need to do. It's going to be so much money that's not needed. When we're talking about a plan that we're going to go back to, I mean, the alcohol industry, it's sustainable regulation. There's going to be more people, 5,000% more than any other substance in the country. So why don't we just follow our make sure that you're more.
The comment was really about following kind of the alcohol industry regulations, especially if our primary mindset is protecting health and welfare. Alcohol does a lot more damage than cannabis, and is much less regulated. So more of a comment. Another question. Yes, sir.
Has there been any discussion with you and Metric about perhaps bringing one of their reps or someone from the company to come speak at one of the meetings and field some questions?
For us here?
Yeah.
Yeah, the question is about having Metric come in. And yes, we actually spoke about that when we were on the phone a couple of weeks ago. Would like to get Metric to come in on this issue. That's going to be pending. Yeah. Caleb.
All right, so there are multiple questions from online. We're looking at about 5. First question, is OMMA responsible for federal compliance as well? I'm assuming they're just asking, are you guys enforcing federal law as well as state law or agency rules?
Okay, first question is about, is OMMA responsible for federal? The short answer is no. That cannabis is still considered illegal at the federal level. That's why we have this strange patchwork of regulations.
Okay. If distillate was tested prior to the new pesticide limits that were just passed, should those products be retested?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So if some distillate was tested prior to the new pesticide limits that were just passed, should those products be retested?
Question is, if distillate or any other product was tested prior to the date of the new regulations, will it have to be retested? Imagine if it's been sold already, no. But.
Yeah, I mean, if it's already been sold, that transaction is complete. I know what my gut tells me, but I'm afraid that I'm going to say something wrong and my lawyers are going to come after me if I misspeak here. But Terry will write that down and we will make sure that we get some clarification on that.
Here's a really, really big one that I get.
Hold on a second, Gail. I think that ties into several things, which like packaging requirements or labeling requirements. When we see these in the rules, when those rules go into effect, those are now the rules, and you're required to be compliant with them. It would be great if we could have some sort of grace period for implementation, because people spend tens of thousands of dollars on packaging alone. And if you're having to print out new labels for all that, it can grind everything to a halt and cost a lot of money. Kayla, last question.
Okay.
Sorry, we'll get to yours next.
So are we allowed to purchase seed out of state?
Question is seed allowed to be purchased from an out-of-state vendor? I'm going to tell you what the Department of Agriculture would say is no, you have to buy from and that's the OMMA's answer as well, that no, you have to buy from a licensed seed vendor here in Oklahoma.
Is that per agency?
We got one right back there, Joanna Hammer.
Is that per agency rules or is that in a statute?
Is that an agency rules or statute? That is an agency rules.
I believe some of it comes from statute. We had a long conversation about seeds not that long ago because these kinds of questions keep coming up. But the way statute is written, I believe that that's where it comes from, but I would have to double check what we're pointing to when we say no.
And there's one last one.
I'll give you my explanation on that, which is that it's a reference to statutory incorporation. And so marijuana as defined includes the seeds, and under statute, it says you can only buy marijuana or marijuana products through a commercial licensee in Oklahoma. So that's the justification.
So in order to change, it would have to be statutory.
Yes, it would have to be statutory
Okay.
to change that.
Last question from online. Is the use of pesticides legal?
What?
Okay, the question is the use of pesticides legal? And go ahead.
So I'm going to do my best to recount the Department of Ag's answer to me on this question. You cannot use pesticides for anything that is not listed on its label. You actually have to read the label, and it tells you can use this on tomatoes and cucumbers, but if it doesn't list daisies, you can't put it on daisies, or maybe that only applies to food. I'm not the ag expert. But because it's federally illegal, they can't put marijuana on the label, and therefore labeled pesticides cannot be used on medical marijuana. There's certain things that are a different type of label that are like the organic type of pesticides, peppermint oil and stuff like that, that falls into a different bucket. We have been trying to work with the Department of Ag to put out some information that clarifies, because pesticide really is a Department of Ag thing. It's not something that we oversee, except for the testing that applies to medical marijuana being sold.
So the answer really is it's tested for, and by definition from the Department of Agriculture, you're not supposed to utilize it. You see it in multiple states, Florida being one, Michigan being one, where they actually have their own pesticide registry and clarify what is allowed to be used or what's not, and that actually informs what's supposed to be tested for or not, but we have not developed that yet here in Oklahoma. So you've been patient.
That was the question.
That was the question? Yeah. And it's the unfortunate part about that and that approach is that all that kind of approach does is encourages non-compliance, because it's almost impossible not to use, especially if you're growing outdoor, to use some sort of biotreatment or preventative approach, or your stuff's going to get just decimated by caterpillars.
And we've been having those conversations with the Department of Ag, and my understanding is that they kind of feel like their hands are tied by the way the federal regulations are written. And I am aware, and so are they, that other states have made some statements on what pesticides can be used on medical marijuana, but we're not at that point yet.
And real quick, I'm going to take my own question. It's more of a comment about it'd be great to see the agency issue some guiding principles. We see the health department do this on other issues, but they refuse to do it for the OMA. And it would be really solid, because that is something that's commonly done amongst other agencies, and it gives, especially on the legal side, allows us some actual straight guidance on what is allowed, what's not. And it's been very challenging over the last 2 years to get a straight answer most of the time. And that's obviously because it's not quite evolved yet. So, okay, Joanna.
Is there any way to get somebody different from the Department of Ag to sit on the Food and Safety Standards Board, other than the egg guy, maybe the nursery guy or the pesticide guy?
Wait, who do we change their director?
So the question is about the Department of Agriculture's appointee to the Food Safety Standards Board / Advisory Board, who's Scott Yates right now. Scott's a great guy, but he's over the egg program, which has nothing to do with cannabis whatsoever. But the appointment to that comes from the Commissioner of Health. So the Commissioner of Health determines who's going to serve on that advisory board or not. And that's something that I think should be a discussion, that either we have the nursery or the seed person or the pesticide person serving in that advisory board. Because I'll just say, from a personal perspective, having served on that for the last 2+ years, it's frustrating when you're dealing with folks that don't have a clue what's going on. And their job with their agency really has nothing to do with cannabis or agriculture or something that as it relates to our industry. So it'd be nice to see a little more movement there. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. So the new rules specify this, but yeah, we're going to get a full legal opinion on this.
You're going to Antarctica.
Question I have to say, ask your lawyer on.
Okay, another question. Ronnie. So, okay, so first question was on how long is a COA valid for from a lab test? And then this will answer that first.
I don't know that we have any rules about an expiration date on a certificate of analysis, so to speak. But in theory, if you're storing it properly, it shouldn't come into contact with pesticides or heavy metals or other contaminants if you're storing it correctly. So, but I don't think that we have anything on that.
It would be the only thing there's been real big issues with this is with consumptive like edibles. And so if you have something that has a short shelf life, then yeah, you might want to make sure that's sold in a reasonable amount of time before your test. And on that point, there are no rules in place or no guiding principles as to the expiration dates for any of these products, period. And then the second part of the question was on pesticides. And so if you're a grower and you've had your product tested, it passes for pesticide testing, you sell that to a processor aggregates a bunch of biomass to produce their product, and then their product tests positive for pesticides. How can they tell which grower sold them the biomass that was contaminated pesticide? Well, they really can't. I guess everyone's test should have said whether it had pesticides or not. But the only way would be to go back if they had a sample of that test sample for that batch, would be to test that for each one of those growers.
Yeah, so that's definitely the first part of the answer. Labs have to keep the reserve sample, I believe, for 90 days. So in theory, depending on how much time has elapsed, you might actually be able to go back to the labs and have that reserve sample rechecked. I know sometimes the problem is that maybe the flour and the trim pass, but once you concentrate it, the parts per million is then beyond the threshold that is allowable. So that does happen sometimes with concentrates. And at that point, it might be difficult to tell which flour it came from because the flour all passed.
Okay, one more question up front. The question is about some labs that say tested valid for 1 month or 1 year. That's probably going to be up to that lab. If they say it on their test results, it's only valid for a month, then it's valid for a month. Well, that would be a term of the certificate of analysis for that laboratory. And if their certificate of analysis says that it's only valid for this amount of time, then that's it. I probably wouldn't be using that laboratory very often. One last question.
Yeah, I was going to say, we got one last question from
Mike Irvin, board member of ours.
Once again, thank you for coming here. And I know some probably haven't seen my very second drought. But I'm going to ask a very general question. In a previous life, we were also part of another industry, obviously, as we all were. And at one point, that industry seemed to really want to get every single actor in there, and I mean just every smallest little pencil violation.
As a part of another industry, the regulatory body at one point seemed to really want to nitpick every player within that industry and issued fines for even the smallest infraction, regardless of whether it was intended or an oversight or just a paperwork mistake. And at some point, the industry realized that, this is probably not positive for the industry. And the regulatory body had a better attitude, I think, towards the industry and took an attitude that they wanted to help the players in that industry. And obviously, the regulatory body they're going to know who most of the bad actors are, and they're going to know that most of the industry wants to try to do the right thing. And so that industry regulatory body changed their attitude to say, well, these little mistakes, these things, we know we have the right to fine you $500. We're not going to do that. We're going to help you fix this and help you not make these mistakes moving forward. Now, bad actors who do things intentionally, they still hammer those folks pretty good. And so, as a final thought, I guess I would want to encourage you as the agency to sort of take that latter approach and not be able or not want to just come in and every time you find some little jot or tittle, take somebody's keister home in your briefcase. But to actually help those players who want to do the right thing, who may have made a small mistake, and help them get on the right path and be more productive moving forward.
Absolutely, thank you. So kind of my take on this, and the same is true for my compliance manager, and that's part of the reason I hired her. Our approach is really about restoring compliance. That doesn't mean that you get a free pass for anything or that, big issues are overlooked. But again, the end of the day, we're here for patient safety, and that's got to be the goal. If it takes you a day to find a piece of paper that you should have had, that's very different to me than if you didn't run a test that you should have run. So restoring compliance really is the goal, because we're not here, we're not here because we hate on the industry. That's not why we're here. We're not here to bring you down or to be a pain. We're here to make sure that the product that's on that shelf is safe, and that there is an avenue for patients to have safe and legal medical marijuana products. So I hear you that we don't want to do things that end up turning the market to black market products. That's not where we want things to go either. But to your point, we want to make sure that the good actors have the ability to be in compliance, so that when we do come in and it's like, all right, like, fix your labels and send us a picture, like get your stuff in order. That we want to make sure that they have the information that they need. That's why we are going to post our compliance checklist. We're going to have a video where our compliance manager walks through an entire compliance check from start to finish, so that not only do you know on paper what that looks like, but someone can talk you through each one of those steps. So little things that we can do to help make sure that those good players really can get everything that they need in order, and that when we come visit you, it's a good time, and it's not something that you dread. I mean, you should be nervous enough to have everything in order, but we're not here to bring them down. I hear you.
Well, with that, this is going to be our last question and comment. I want to thank Director Williams for coming out tonight and presenting and dealing with all of us yahoos. It's really an honor for our association, our members, and really business owners across the state of Oklahoma to be able to have an open dialogue with our players. And that's really to Mike's point. I've worked with the DEQ for years, the Corporation Commission for years, and that's an agency that we work together on trying to find solutions and making sure that it's not a stick and a carrot. It's more of a, how do we build the appropriate response? So I want to say thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. We look forward to hosting you again. Everyone give her a hand, please. So with that, again, next Thursday will be our Policy and Pints in Tulsa at the Dead Armadillo Brewery. If you're a guest tonight, we encourage you to check in with Kaylin on your way out.
By encourage, do it.
Yeah, and join, that's what funds our operations. And if you haven't gotten engaged, I highly encourage you to get engaged in one of our committees. This is a way that you can really move momentum forward and get involved. It takes all of us, not just a handful. So thank you guys. Tip your bartenders, please, and be careful out there.